with VTC. Um, Yep. So as far as I know, we have a lot of Vietnamese students in your school,
Yes.
and you just tell us something about your projects in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So can you share with us some your knowledge as well as the experience of sharing the the knowledge of environmental issues to between Australia and Vietnam?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So just to introduce myself, I'm Ong Batelaan. I'm the Dean of the School of the Environment at Flinders University. And at Flinders University, and in this school, we focus on environmental issues, but that's quite broad. That means, for example, that we have postgraduate programs in environmental management. We have one in groundwater. We have a water resources management topic or program. We have a GIS and remote sensing, environmental health. So a suite of different postgraduate programs which deal all with separate environmental aspects. And these programs are highly beneficial for students in Australia, but also students from abroad. And we have quite a few students from Vietnam, because there are ample of water or environmental related issues to deal with in Vietnam. And so they come here with different with scholarships or own funding to study with us on those aspects. And some of those students are, for example, PhD students. Just 2 days ago or on Friday, a new PhD student arrived who is connected to a project which I'm coordinating in Vietnam on water management, basically, of an area in southern central Vietnam, Binh Dinh province, where we look at an area where farmers are doing agriculture on very poor soils, and so they have to use groundwater to irrigate these soils and to add fertilizers. And in order to understand better such an area, especially from the water point of view, we investigate how much groundwater is there and how much they sustainably can use, for example. And so a PhD student can do a lot of interesting work here because we have, for example, a lot of detailed groundwater knowledge and expertise in terms of measurements, but also modeling, and we try to extend that to our masters and PhD students, and they can benefit, I believe, a lot from that.
Yep. How do you think about? Yeah, we are focusing here on this ship on the story of the Golden Eye.
Yeah.
It's really interesting story about the knowledge of rainfall and its impacts on agriculture.
Yes.
But we may have the same problems of water in Vietnam. How can I or the other ones who are getting some knowledge from environmental issue here to translate it and apply those things in Vietnam?
Yes, that's a good question. But to come back to the Goida line there, I think that's a very nice example of how already a long time ago it was recognized that basically climate, land use, agriculture is very much related, and that you have to take the physical conditions of an area into account in order to do sustainable agriculture.
Yeah.
And so that was observed, and you see now that with climate change aspects that there might be shifts in that, and we at least have to look very careful of our environment and what is happening and what that means for what we are doing in terms of, for example, agriculture. In Vietnam, it's the same. It's it's not particularly the exact goiter line, but it is for Vietnam issues like changing precipitation regimes or rising sea levels, which means that because of Vietnam's long coastline, that might be an impact on, for example, seawater intrusion in aquifers. And I have had or still working on another project in Vietnam, and where we have looked especially at that, how changed climate will have an impact on coastal aquifers and therefore on the available groundwater resources in such an area, and what kind of impact that will have on local persons who are living and working there. And so it is about learning how basically the environment works, how is climate and land and water related to each other, and that's scientific understanding. How can you investigate that? And if you investigate that here, let's say the goiter line, you can use that type of analysis and methods that we use for that also in other areas. I always say, for example, that the law of how groundwater flows in the subsurface is not different in Vietnam than here. It's the same law, and you have to understand how that works and what kind of data you need, but then you can use that in different places. Of course, each area has its specifics, which you need to understand and get grips on, but then you can use your expertise which you gain in one area also in another area.
Okay, that's nice. Yes, may I ask you another one? I think this is the last one. But being involved in a couple of projects in Vietnam, what can you personally say the views of environmental issues that Vietnam is facing now?
I think I have been doing projects in Vietnam since 1998, I believe, a long time already. And it was very interesting to come into Vietnam at that time, and then very regular every year or a few years coming back and see the development of Vietnam, and working with different institutes and with many masters and PhD students, and also seeing the development of environmental problems and also the awareness, the growing awareness in Vietnam also of environmental problems. I think what is clear is that because of the strong population growth, but also the strong economic development, more and more problems, together with climate change, for example, also that these issues are raising a number of environmental problems. And what is good is that there is a clear awareness in Vietnam that that needs to be treated and that we need to do something on that. And so in that sense I'm quite positive about Vietnam. It's not that that is neglected. It's a matter of keeping up the pace in terms of managing the environmental problems with, for example, managing the economic growth and the population growth in terms of keeping that in balance. And that's a challenge, and we all need to work on that. You, us, and we try to teach and educate people, more and more students, to help Vietnam in that sense. And I believe there is a good willingness in Vietnam available to deal with that. So quite positive.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.